Hi guys, welcome to About 30. Today we are going to be talking about a new series we call How We Made Before 30. And on today's episode, we'll be talking about an interesting guy who has really worked in the media and startup space for the last 10 years. And with me today is Sep, as always. Sep, how you doing?
Always, man. Thank you, Festus.
Yeah, welcome.
And thank you, Mr. Victor, for joining us.
And on the call with us is Mr. Victor Ekwalo. Mr. Victor, good day to you. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, so before we move on, we'd like you to introduce yourself properly because I'm not sure I can do justice to that. So, so please, introduction from you.
Okay, my name is Victor Ekwalo, as you have rightly mentioned, and I'm Nigerian.
Of course.
So I grew up in Lagos. I lived most of my life in Lagos. I was born in southeastern part of Nigeria. I was born in Enugu. I lived a bit in Anambra State, and then I grew up most of my life in Lagos. I speak Yoruba and Igbo fluently. I speak English too. And I have lived a very interesting life, right? I have worked in different industries, and I like to think about myself as a creative problem solver.
Okay. Because
I've done a lot of things, and a lot of them revolve around creatively solving problems. I started off working in the entertainment space. I worked in music, I worked in movies. I did a bit of everything, did business at some point. I got into tech in the mid-2010s. It's been almost 10 years now.
Okay.
And started off as a journalist, as a tech journalist, and did a bit of tech journalism for a bit. And I started off with TechPoint Africa at the time, and started off doing tech journalism, then moved on to building the business holistically. Did that journalism aspect, very holistically, won awards, and then moved on from there to startups, where I did a bit of marketing, growth, supporting startups holistically from a product strategy, a product direction perspective. And then these days, I own a startup. I'm building a startup currently and experimenting a lot with, digital products and digital innovations, because that, interestingly, has become a hobby of mine over the years. But yeah, that has been my career trajectory, or what it looks like, or what it has looked like over the years. Yes, I'm a Christian. And what else is there? Yeah, I'm a very multi-dimensional person, but this gives you an overview of who I am, what I do to some extent.
Well, I believe there are many more things we would have to get to find out, with time, because of the conversation. And particularly, I'm really interested about, your trajectory, some of the things you've done. And I could see that maybe they are kind of interrelated, but they are different sectors. You worked in business, in media, in tech. So there's a nexus, there's a middle ground for you, even though you were a generalist kind of. And I'll come to that. I just want you to keep it somewhere. That is an interesting question for you. But I want to start off with asking about what values, and should I use the word tenets of inspiration that got you to this level, especially when you look back at your childhood or your teenagehood. So there were values, because we're all driven by values, primarily. Yeah. So what values drove you to most of the things you've done now? Then you can try to bring in the 30, that bigger problem. You're a creative problem solver.
Exactly.
So how were you able to navigate that timing, borrowing the values you got from your childhood and up to this point?
And also you have to consider the fact that we grew up in a society, you're a Nigerian, and in Nigeria it's hard to come by, it's hard to see values, or it's hard to, let's say, most of us did not grow up, or most people did not grow up in families where values and principles are taken seriously.
True.
So you as a Nigerian, how have you been able to, create values, or let's say follow values that has led you to, to this point where you are today?
Okay. Interestingly, I I had a very, I dare say, unconventional upbringing to a very large extent. My parents were very un-Nigerian in how they brought me up, because we didn't have there were a lot of things that were not happening in our home that I was seeing outside, right? For instance, my parents didn't beat us. It wasn't a thing. Like, we were not hit, we were not beaten or flogged as reprimand. And I remember growing up, when we used to go to school, I would see children say, I lost a pencil, or my shoe is spoiled. And I'm like, oh, sorry. And the person is like, oh, my mother will kill me. I'm just there like, why would your mother kill you that your, sandal is cut or your pencil is missing, But that was not something I was able to connect with at that point, because it wasn't a reality for me. My parents didn't hit us. I think that kind of gave me a lot. That kind of helped me a lot. I will still get to that, or I might get to that later. But I think that's not being Nigerian in how my parents were kind of helped me a lot and formed the foundation of a lot of things. From a values perspective, growing up was hard, right? So there was not any silver spoon, or there was no spoon whatsoever, right? So it was really hard. And there were a lot of things that I had to learn. And when you think about it in retrospect, some things become clearer. But I feel like, if we're being honest, it's a mixture of different things, right? There is my parents, there was like community around, there was God, because I always attribute a lot of things in my life to God. It sounds very Nigerian or maybe cliche if you think about it, but it's the truth. Because like I said, my upbringing was really hard. So, but from a values perspective, early on, I learned I learned delayed gratification. All right. And like I said, I learned it. It was something that I picked up from our circumstances, from, just looking around, everything that was happening. Delayed gratification, that was like one of the first things I learned. I learned the value of hard work. Because, again, one of those things that you could not... there was no way around it, basically. Nothing was handed to me on a platter, ever. So from a very young age, I realized that I had to work for a lot of things that I had. So it instilled the value of hard work into me. And there was just like perseverance. I am very strong and big on persevering. I persevere a lot. Then I also learned integrity. I remember the first time I heard integrity being put succinctly, it was in a Sunday school class. I think I was in junior secondary school at the time. I was definitely in junior secondary school at the time. And I remember my Sunday school teacher talking about integrity as the thing you do when nobody is looking at
you. Yeah,
true. Right? And till today, that stuck with me. Growing up in the typical or traditional Nigerian society, it was kind of hard to navigate integrity because, things were just all over the place. People did what they liked. But yeah, integrity, hard work, perseverance, delayed gratification, those were like some of the things that were values that I learned or I picked up growing up. And like I said, again, learning them was a combination of just my circumstances, just watching people around me, and yeah, I think that's it mostly.
Yeah, so talking about these values, right? And you mentioned delayed gratification, you mentioned integrity. How has that really helped you to become a better professional, a better adult, a better businessman, looking back?
So delayed gratification and perseverance are really important. I know if I say this younger generation, I'll sound like I'm old. But,
of course, you are 30 plus.
Yeah, but it's less a this younger generation thing and more a norm in the timeline we're in. So younger people, older people, there is this lack of patience, right? People are looking for... There's the blow mentality. I mean, think about it in Nigeria. Yeah. It's not even just Nigeria. Oh, you want to blow. As an artist, as a creative, you want to blow. But the truth is, most of the people you're looking at as reference to blowing have been on this thing for the better part of a decade, right?
Exactly.
But you are seeing the manifestation of the work they've been doing, and you just want to jump into that manifestation in real time, right? Secondly, I worked in tech for the longest time. And one thing I see is over the last, I dare say almost the last decade, or less actually, maybe 5 years, tech has become this like really high earning career path, especially for Africans. It has become this like really low entry, high earning career path that like has changed lives, changed families. Somebody just goes from, not from living in the slums to suddenly earning $4,000 a month. And this person's family is changed forever, right? Tech has become that thing to a very large extent. But increasingly over the years, what I have been seeing or what has become predominant is people coming into tech for the money, which is great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's an amazing thing. Come into tech to make money. But the side effect of that is that people just want to come into tech and make money immediately, right? And that's not how things work. You have to learn a skill. You have to put in the work. You have to show your work. You have to build up your portfolio. Nobody wants to do any of these things anymore. And this is not just for tech, generally in everything. I'm just using a sector that I'm very much familiar with, to give an instance. But to speak to your question more directly, patience has helped me, perseverance has helped me, in that I understand the place of process, right? Okay. I made a note of my journal recently, and I'm like, I can't remember what to say verbatim, but it's like, I know where I'm going. I understand that it will take time, but the process is annoying. Right? Okay. So it's like, I see all the things that need to happen. I know that this thing will take time before it manifests, it materializes. But I have become something of a doer, and I have become impatient. So it's like, I understand that the process, but it's like, this will take time. So I had to make that note in my journal very recently. I'm like, I understand the process, but I'm also very annoyed at the time it's going to take. So I think like just having that patience has kind of helped me to put in the work and progressively grown as a person, from a skill perspective, just do work that I understand does not necessarily have to pan out immediately, which is how life is actually. And I think that a lot of the things I have worked on or I have done, I have been grateful for it, and looking back in retrospect, those things didn't make sense at the time. There was no instant gratification. Some of them, there was no gratification, right? I just looked at this thing. I'm like, this is in line with what I wanted to do with my goals and everything. I will do it. I will work on this. I will build this, right? And at the time, it didn't make sense. But looking back 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, I'm seeing how these things have panned out, and seeing those results in real time have even stilled my resolve and made me even more patient. Again, like I said, I am, on one hand, I'm very patient with things. Yeah. That's how I am able to just do things. On the other hand, from a long-term perspective, yes, I was listening to a podcast recently, and they're talking about, oh my God, what's the podcast? So he's talking about like being impatient in the short term and being patient in the long term. So short-term impatience helps you be a better doer, execute things faster, just work, do things. But long-term impatience, short-term impatience helps you do all these things. But long-term patience means that you are impatient in the short term, you're doing all these things, but you also understand that this thing is going to take time. Right? There is no shortcut to process, basically.
Well, that's a lot you've given us, and when you were talking, I was just trying to think of something, and for me in particular, I know about we having values only when it's easy, to put them into practice.
Yes.
So yes. I'm very tempted to ask you, which I'm already asking, the cause of your maybe your years growing up, 30, the crises, and now in your career, what's that particular experience that tested your values? What's that thing that happened and you were like, I have the integrity, I think I have the integrity, I have the perseverance, I have the hard work, I have creative problem solving skills, but this is the true test. So at what point, and were you flexible with your values kind of, or did you compromise? Did you compromise? Because honestly, I think that's the highlight for most of us. At that point where you think, oh, I think I'm a very honest person, or I think I have integrity, and maybe my mom is in the hospital and someone offers me 10 million to do something shitty and illegitimate. So can you just share that experience if you have any, or what do you think about that?
So I have this belief that your life is a steady journey to learning yourself, right? And it is here's another way to think about it, right? There is, when you meet people that are very absolute or confident or overconfident in just asserting who they think they are, there is this thing that they always have this identity crisis where they face real life scenarios, right? A good example is money. Money always changes people. Money will always change people, right? And when you meet people that have not had money in that sense of the word, like a large amount of money, they will always tell you all the things that they will turn down if they are offered money. But the truth is, you've never been offered that money, so you will never know.
Yeah, you never know.
In fact, I have a saying that sometimes you need to get in that situation before you really know the true person, your true self. You need to get to that position where you definitely know that, okay, I'm truly honest, I have integrity, and I can apply delayed gratification as well.
And another example, that do not brag about something you've not experienced.
Exactly.
Like, don't say, if I'm giving 10 million, I will turn it down, when you've not actually gone through that process.
Very sure.
You know?
So, like, there's a humility that comes from experience where you know that there is no absolute way to think about anything, right? And one thing I never say is never. I never say never from an adventuring perspective where I'm like, never say never. I will do this thing, I'll go ahead and make this thing work. I also never say never from I would never do this, right? What we just keep doing, or what I keep doing, is be humble and keep on working on myself, and then keep on praying. Like I said, I'm a Christian, and I believe that to a very large extent, like, God helps in these things. To say it in pidgin, person who they know himself finish.
Exactly.
Right? And yes, once you just believe that, I'm confident in this, my identity, just with this sense of self, identity crisis sets in, and something tests you and shows your true color. To answer your question more specifically, there's been a lot of scenarios where my resolve or my
values has been tested.
Yes. And I think there's been so much that I've lost count, to be very honest, right? And it's been more predominant in the Nigerian society. And I'm going to give an example. Like, I remember working as a journalist, as a tech journalist. And at the time, there was not a lot of people doing what I was doing, what we were doing at the time. So it's like, we were hotcake, And then there was just this brown envelope culture that was very pervasive.
I think I can relate to that because I have a background in journalism too. So you
have been a journalist too.
Exactly,
so you know what I'm talking about. There's this brown envelope culture that is very pervasive, and I was at this phase of my life where I was just constantly broke. Like, I was always broke. I was always hungry, like literally broke, literally hungry, right? And you go to events, you go to things where people are giving you real big money, real substantial money, and
money packed in an envelope, big money. I'm talking about 200K sometimes.
Consistently, this thing keeps happening, and at some point, you ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? What's the point? Like, you begin to question those kind of things, right? Yes. Now, generally speaking, like I said, and because of the spaces I've worked in, like creative spaces, entertainment, the media, like, there's just these situations thrown at you on a daily basis. It's like there's a litmus test every day. And interestingly, this is one of the things that I do not appreciate about the social cultural fabric of Nigeria, that, like, a lot of these things have been normalized. And if you're somebody that has your ability to thrive as a Nigerian, unfortunately, or is directly proportional to your will to bend a little bit every now and again, right? And that is one of my least favorite things about the Nigerian society. Every day you will be tested. Like, one thing or the other will just keep on coming out. And so, yes, to move on to the next part of the question, where it's like, oh, have there been times that I have had to compromise? The answer is yes. And it was mostly a function of how, like I said, the society is structured, right? Yeah. A good example I just think about off the top of my head is the passport scenario, right?
Okay. I think everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, you never bribe anybody to get a passport, and you're here, you have a trip, a very important or pivotal trip in the next 1 week or a few weeks, or even 1 month, and you get to the passport office, you know that this bribery has been institutionalized.
Exactly.
So
you just have to pay.
It almost feels normal. But I mean, you and I know it's a bribe, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I've paid bribes to get passports, right? That's something I have done. And like, there's just been also like a lot of these scenarios where, you know, you just have to do things that normally would be very much against your values, right? Mm. This is what being Nigerian can equate to. It's really hard to live in Nigeria and say you want to be unbending. It is really hard.
Very, very hard.
Yes.
I must agree. Really. And I like the fact that you mentioned humility, you know, talking about values. You know, most times, especially growing up, you tell yourself you can never do this. True. You never get to this situation where you're going to practice infidelity, practice dishonesty. You understand? But growing up, I have to start telling myself that, see, guy, you need God. Exactly. Like, exactly, you need God.
Just see yourself doing things, man.
Exactly. Just see yourself doing stupid things, especially. You understand? So that part of humility where you tell God that, God, I'm human like other people in Nigeria, right? I'm just like other Nigerians. And I don't want to do things as this, right? And that humility helps you not to really, let's say, taunt Satan or taunt the devil. If there's any word like that. Like, oh, I will never see myself doing that. No, don't say that. Just be open-minded and just pray to God that I don't want to do this. I wouldn't want to find myself in this situation. You understand?
But at the same time as well, I tend to think that one thing, just like you, my dad taught me was being strong-willed, you know. Yeah. And being in Nigeria, for you to survive, especially when maybe the consequences are not so dear.
Okay.
Like this passport scenario now. It's not, the implications are not...
There are no implications, sir. If you pay bribe...
Bend your integrity a bit.
Yeah.
And if it's Professor Modo, when I was in school, he said, what was that? Is this thing? There's one political word he used, like to rub palm, but there's a way he calls it. So, but that's not a very consequential case. But there are some times when, just in quote, maybe you're being paid to go kill someone. Or you're being paid to do something that would damage the lives of people. I think, for me, that's actually the true test. Because these ones, as long as you're in Nigeria, he's saying very, very hard. That's what he said. But I want to say it's impossible. If you're in Nigeria, because even just going to the bus stop or trying to get Uber, you're in the office.
It's just too much.
It's just too much. Like everyday temptation all the time. So it's just trying to balance it. No, I have values and I have to be very strong. Okay, I'm talking about integrity, honesty. Yeah, this is it. You know, I don't just lie about things that have huge implications, you know, but at the same time, there's this moment you bring in flexibility and...
Exactly.
So thank you very much.
So Mr. Victor, we're going to talk about money. I know money is really quite scary, you know, especially if you're coming from Nigeria. Whenever you hear the term money, you're scared to address it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put you out there in terms of your finances, but I'd really love to know what are the things that you did, you know, very quite early that actually made you to be financially sustained, for you to achieve this financial sustenance or financial freedom or financial independence. What are the things that you did?
We believe that's where you are at this point. You know, the journey is still long, but I think you've arrived, kind of.
Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you for your faith in me. I can appreciate the faith in me. I mean, financial independence, financial freedom, we're just throwing this word. I really appreciate the faith. But on a more serious note, I have had a really interesting relationship with money.
Okay.
And I think that as I've gotten older, my relationship with money has gotten better. Not as much as I would want it to, but it has gotten better. And like I mentioned earlier, I did not grow up with a lot of money. right?
Okay.
I did not grow up with any money. And one thing I'm grateful for is that did not affect my view of life or my values. I learned really early. Not to chase money. I don't know why. I'm not sure where that came from. Again, I feel like it's this thing I mentioned earlier, just this mix of different factors, right? I realized early that I didn't chase money. My career choices, my decisions were not motivated by money, right? If anything, money was not a major factor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something I advise any young person to do, but I mean, that was me. I remember when I got into tech, I was on a path to start making like a ton of money, to become more comfortable. But I knew that this was a really short-term thing. I knew that this wasn't something I wanted to do in the future. And there was this opportunity to work in a company that would transition me into tech. That at the time when I started, I didn't have a salary, actually. We moved from there to just having like a few tens of thousands of naira every other month. But one of the things I'm very grateful for is that I haven't been motivated by money. As I've gotten older, I've realized that I don't want to say more important. It is important to build value and money will follow.
Okay.
And that's
an interesting one.
Yes, that has been my experience.
Thank you so much, Victor, for this conversation. We've really had a good time having this insightful conversation with you, and I'm sure everyone listening in has really learned one or two from you.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Victor. We sincerely appreciate you.
It was good to share, talk to you people. It was like a really insightful conversation for me too, talking about all of these things in retrospect and in real time. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Take care.
Thank you. See you next time on About 30.
And with that, we've come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much, Sep, for coming around.
Thank you very much, brother.
Yeah, we appreciate
it. was really a value-packed session.
Exactly. And we look forward to doing this again.
A lot to learn, a lot to take out from this, and the opportunity to introspect. So thank you, man, Festus. I'm really delighted.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.